we're no longer in this unipolar US versus maybe lesser enemy China or Russia. It's now completely multipolar, meaning there's no clear dominator in the world. This can be extremely dangerous, especially for Europe, which is not exactly the winner in this. We haven't caught up yet. We're still catching up, I would say. The way to do this is by making sure that we get access to the type of compute that shores up our sovereignty. That's basically the only leverage that we have. Like, it's very asymmetric. We need to get better at three things, and that's scale of compute, like making sure that we can do more compute in every aspect of the world. So more physical semiconductors, but also do better compute and achieve more things with the compute that we have. We need to get resilience of compute, also meaning we need to protect our physical infrastructure using compute in the best way, also against external manipulation, also understanding what AI does, how it affects other compute systems. And then finally, we need to equip all these compute resources, the machines, with high quality data and senses. And we need to guard that. We need to establish some form of economic guardrails that let machines transact also and share those resources across various types of kind of heterogeneous compute resources. This is very much going the direction of ultimately integrating everything that we do, every aspect of our daily life with compute. And only if we really control this are we truly sovereign.
Here's a few words from our beloved sponsor. If you're looking to meet key players in Central Eastern Europe's private markets, this is the conference you don't want to miss. Join us for the 14th edition of the premier networking event for emerging Europe. You'll meet investors from firms like Antenna Digital Ventures, EBRD, EIB, Erst Group, IFC, Tibus Ventures, and many more. Join 0100 Emerging Europe from May the 15th to the 16th in Budapest.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Welcome back, everyone, to the European VC podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jonatan from Inflection. Jonatan, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
So, Jonatan, Inflection, I know you. I've been an avid follower of your writing, as well as also your co-GP's writing, but not everyone necessarily does. Maybe you would start us by telling the story about Inflection.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to be fair, I wasn't there from the very start, but I've been here for the majority of the investments that we've done. So let me tell you maybe shortly where we're coming from and what the background is to the name also, as that has a significant meaning to how we invest and how we think about the world. Inflection started out as my co-GP, Alex Lang, who is a lawyer and economist by training. He was working at Inventure for a couple of years and was always focused on sort of the frontiers and the fringes of technology, the next larger thing that is coming. Like, he wasn't able to tap into those in the way that he wanted to, and so decided to leave. He was at Index Ventures last before he started Inflection, to leave Index and go out and raise his own fund. That was in 2019. So together with our partners in the back office, he raised the first vehicle. That was back then the most, I'd say, interesting novel technology that was really changing the fabric of society, of digital society mostly, was really around crypto. So the first couple of investments were very crypto heavy. We built a strong network in that space. I would say there was a massive inflow of really high quality talent into that space as well. If you didn't want to follow the traditional path of starting a playbook or something that has a napkin attached to it, that was kind of what you did, because it was very, very weird, very strange thing to do, start a crypto company in 2019. That's where we saw the real venture style outcomes. So what we think about venture is it has a place as a product because it has this extremely convex profile. So what that means is we can make a rather small bet at the very early stage and have an extremely large outcome. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen if you put it in the right space and in the right type of company. Back then, that was very much crypto in 2019 in our eyes.
To add some context to that, that's exactly the question I asked you when we had our first chat, right? So I know Inflection for being all about crypto, but now you're very much about sovereign compute, which obviously, and we'll talk more about that technology-wise and trend-wise, looks like crypto in many ways, or has parts of the crypto both community and technology stack that is similar. However, it's also considerably not similar. So my question to you was, walk me through how you've moved from being known as a crypto fund to now being about sovereign compute.
Yeah, so this has, I'd say, two aspects. One is the marketing aspect of it. How are we seen externally, and how are we branded and so on? And the other aspect is, how do we think about it internally? How do we reason about what technology achieves and what it does to society, and what our role as a rather boutique venture fund is in that space? Maybe tackling the internal piece first, and there I have to go back even further to 2016 when I started out in crypto. That was my first job, actually, as after graduating as an engineer. Was I got to use what I had done in my master thesis, which was privacy on blockchain, and I got to apply that to a context that had massive impact. Like I couldn't identify any other opportunity in the space of all the jobs I could have done or companies I could have started that could achieve the same thing. So I chose to work at a very small company here in Munich. I was the first technical hire. I was implementing the first prototype of a product that then became a financial backbone for the World Food Program. We delivered, through this product in the end, over 3 years, we delivered millions and millions of dollars of aid to refugees in Jordan. My main motivation for doing anything in crypto at that time was, wow, we have this amazing new technology. It can do these like 100x improvements over existing bureaucracies and digital products. This is exactly what I want to spend my time on. That meant distancing myself from the sort of Bitcoin speculative, back then it was Bitcoin, like speculative coin ICO bubble, financially. Maybe that was stupid of me, but from a principles perspective, I think I couldn't have done anything different. And that applies today very much, right? And in the investments that we've done, we want to help create long-lasting companies that have an impact. I'm not using impact as a sort of greenwashing word or anything, right? I want them to produce products that people use and that have a sustainable business model. The crypto investments that we did all had a very strong computational component, right? That was our main motivation and view on crypto as a world computer. We saw new type of cryptography and distributed systems theory being applied in the real world and really building the new internet. That's very much how we still see crypto today, although that part of crypto is a very minor part of all the crypto projects out there. So the speculative DeFi applications, they fit a very different type of investor, I think. And that's not us. We look still very much at cryptography and the enabled businesses from having access to these new types of trust models. And the same thing goes for other types of non-blockchain related applications that we look at, or companies that we look at, that we look for these inflection points, really, in terms of technology, society, founders, like just at the beginning of this takeoff, really. What is the thing that has to change for this idea that probably existed for a long time to become reality? To make a concrete example, we invested into a stratospheric airplane company about 2 years ago. Stratospheric airplanes have been around people have tried it since the 70s. They didn't work for a number of reasons, right? Like Airbus did one, I think Boeing tried to do one, a couple of smaller initiatives tried to build some, and they just crashed all the time. It was super expensive, they crashed. And then this new company comes out of Amazon Prime Air and says, we think we're at the right time now, and we have the right idea to build one that works. We studied all the ones that didn't work, and now we kind of know why they didn't. The inflection points were battery density and cycle stability. So I can charge a battery many, many times, meaning I can stay up for a long time and recharge during the day. And the computational modeling of building such an airplane is possible today because we have the resources. We can understand what forces the winds and the weather up at 20 kilometers altitude do to an airframe. We couldn't do that 10 years ago. And we also have massively better and cheaper solar panels, right? So we can harness that energy. This is really what we look for in every investment that we do.
Do you know, just because you talk about inflection points here, and I've often thought this when I saw your name as well, do you know Mike Maple's framework of inflection point theory and so on?
I've heard of it. I know there are similar, I think we think about it similarly. I can hear much of the same nomenclature, and also how you're thinking about how the different things, both societally, technologically, and also in the founder's journey, match up to be three powerful inflections that match up and then create an opportunity that you as a VC want to back. Quite interesting, I find. Then let me just ask you, because I want to go a little bit back to crypto, just because it's great to talk about crypto with someone who is maybe not knee deep and highly incentivized to still prop up the industry. Because what you described is there's parts that I really love and I think are going to be incredibly important and also within your thesis. And then there are parts where you've kind of distanced yourself and said, no, this is not us. And I'm thinking maybe you'd be up for sharing a bit of the dynamics in this part of crypto that you're saying, I think it's unsustainable. I see great founders turning away from it. I see ourselves also not wanting to play that game. Maybe starting with a founder perspective, because that's the most important in my opinion. We have misaligned structures in general, right? There are pushes for very clever people, or there were pushes from very clever people, people with PhDs in math and physics to go into crypto. It appeared like the new shiny thing that you should be working on if you're kind of a successful person. And it also seemed like there was abundant money, which there was / is still in terms of venture funding. That is great, but that doesn't match up with the reality like a few years down the line. If we look at many projects that were kind of sold or marketed as impactful, long-termist projects that will change the world or change the internet at least, right? A lot of them end up launching a token, and then that at some point goes to zero. And then the question is, what's the incentive for the founder to stick around? In the normal venture world, we have equity, and that's the main incentive, and that's aligned over 10 years until you IPO or get acquired. In crypto land, there is a high push or a very strong push from VCs and investors to launch a token as soon as possible, because that's when the sooner you can extract the value, the higher your IRR will be, and then you can go on to the next thing. That does not match up with creating a sustainable business model, something that actually works for a long time. That is incentive aligned with creating a great marketing machine. That's not what we want, right? That's not what we want to invest into. Others, more I guess nihilist investors are free to do so, but that's not how we want to. The types of businesses that we want to have on our portfolio website, right? If you look at them, I don't want to see launch the token and token price down 99% at on all the projects in 5 years. So some specific stories are founders who try to raise the next round, have amazing traction, but are met with the kind of somewhat jaded larger funds, specifically in the US or in Southeast Asia, and are being told, we will back you, we'll happily invest into you if you promise that you launch a token and that we'll get X% of that allocation. And if the founders don't want to sign those docs and say, actually, we don't know if that makes sense for us as a company, or as if we want to be attached to that type of company, then it becomes very difficult. And that's an issue, right?
Maybe, Jonathan, just to those that are a little less well versed in this, could you explain the dynamics there? Why is it that the launch of a token would be one of the requirements that's nestled in the terms for a funding round to happen?
Yeah, so it's not always a bad thing, right? There are tokens that have value and fulfill a function. And I mean, look at the whole stablecoin category of companies. This is one of the examples of amazing technology, just supremely superior to any of the existing infrastructure that we have. But aside from that, if I am at a seed stage company, I might not know exactly how to build my customer base yet. I may have some interesting technology, but I don't know what the incentive mechanisms should be. So this goes pretty deep into game theory, and to not to go too deep, but it's essentially I program a rule, and that rule should make people do certain things. So incentivize people to take a certain action by rewarding them with some additional percentage points of a token. In the VC's case, specifically in crypto, the incentive is I want to make as big of a return as soon as possible. So if you look at some of these crypto companies, think, okay, what could be the outcome? What's the potential exit path, say in after a Series A? And they say, actually, the only thing that we've seen has been 1 or 2 IPOs, Coinbase, for example, a few acquisitions of like medium to small outcomes. And then we've seen all of our returns basically driven by token launches. And after I've sold off my tokens, I don't care at all what happens to it. Definitely what we've seen in real life, even in some cases, blatant kind of nihilism of we want you to launch a token as soon as possible. We want to get as big of a share as possible, and we don't want to have any vesting involved, which would prolong the time period during which you can sell.
I think everyone that's listening in here will understand exactly what you're saying and be able to fill the gaps. I think it's just so important that we have this honest conversation in a place like this about what's actually going on in crypto land when it comes to this type of crypto, this part of the crypto landscape. Let's, Jonathan, go to the sovereign compute thesis that is then the overarching name or the category that you work under now. Tell me everything about it. What does sovereign compute mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have seen in the past decades, actually, a massive decrease in productivity, specifically in Europe, right, but also to some degree in the United States compared to China. Now, not becoming too geopolitical, but we realized we need a techno-industrial renaissance. That's the big headline. Now, how do we achieve this? How do we make ourselves more productive? How can we shore up our digital world and our physical world at the same time? There's across the entire spectrum of technologies, I think there's only one thing that ties everything together, and that's compute. Computers using mathematics to describe and act on the world. They change everything about how we think, learn, build, how we fight even. They already reshape our brains. If you think about, of course, also some negative aspects, but how many phone numbers do you remember today compared to 20 years ago?
My own?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't even know my wife's phone number, right?
No. She hates me for it, though.
Yeah, sometimes I think it would be practical. Maybe I'll just get a cut to.
Yeah, I think so too.
It reshapes our labs, our factories, our energy grids, our battlefields, all of our institutions. So if we look at the Industrial Revolution, where we all of a sudden had access to energy through steam power, that was a huge change. If we look at the early innings of computers in World War II and onwards towards the one in Vietnam, compute started to have an effect on this. Compute started to affect not just the actual battlefield, but how these companies make progress. If I could put more semiconductors in the hands of my researchers, they could be more productive. They could discover new things that would then change the balance of power. Right onto the 1990s, we had this clear like hegemony of the US, with them dominating everything from the internet, mobile, onto socials in like 2010, so on, building the cloud essentially, everyone else playing catch up with the US. At some point, China caught up, right? Now we're no longer in this unipolar US versus maybe lesser enemy China or Russia. It's now completely multipolar, meaning there's no clear dominator in the world. This can be extremely dangerous, especially for Europe, which is not exactly the winner in this. We haven't caught up yet. We're still catching up, I would say. The way to do this is by making sure that we get access to the type of compute that shores up our sovereignty. That's basically the only leverage that we have. Like, it's very asymmetric. We need to get better at three things, and that's scale of compute, like making sure that we can do more compute in every aspect of the world. So more physical semiconductors, but also do better compute and achieve more things with the compute that we have. We need to get resilient and have resilience of compute, also meaning we need to protect our physical infrastructure using compute in the best way, also against external manipulation, also understanding what AI does, how it affects other compute systems. And then finally, we need to equip all these compute resources, the machines, with high quality data and senses. And we need to guard that. We need to establish some form of economic guardrails that let machines transact also, and share those resources across various types of kind of heterogeneous compute resources. This is very much going the direction of ultimately integrating everything that we do, every aspect of our daily life with compute. And only if we really control this are we truly sovereign. Meaning on an individual level, go ahead.
3 parts: scale of compute, resilience of compute, and integration of compute, or how do you call the last one?
We call it flow, so flow of data. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, let's unpack each. No, first of all, I want to ask you a question. Whenever I think about verticals for VC firms, I try and think about why does it make sense to cut this out as one specific vertical in its own. B2B SaaS, same playbook, same customers, same kind of ecosystem of founders, same business model, same go-to-market generally. For that reason, made a ton of sense to have a B2B SaaS-centric VC. Because once you've seen, I'm about to say once you've seen one, you've seen them all. That's not true, but you definitely build up repetitions within that space very quickly where everything fits in together nicely. Sometimes I don't like to hear too broad deep tech VCs talk, because I kind of think that, well, the only thing that's the common denominator in deep tech is it oftentimes involves hardware. That doesn't necessarily, but it's super hard. and there's more of a tech risk than maybe a market risk. But that doesn't really tell me much about how you as a VC will win. The researchers come from different places. The go-to-markets are different. The technology is completely different. So for that reason, like, the fact that you focus on deep tech doesn't tell me very much, and doesn't make me very comfortable believing that a 2-person team or 5-person team or whatever will get access to the best opportunities and will be able to be super value add here. Why does it make sense to cut out this thesis of its own? Sometimes it's for LP reasons. But why does it make sense in your mind to cut out the thesis of sovereign compute?
Yeah, we try to not let LP meaning or LP,
that's the right answer.
Point like
it's not always the true answer, also, but I think it's true for you.
Yeah, exactly. I think we tried. So sorry to zoom out again, but I have to mention this because it's very like at my core and at our core as a fund, right? The first fund was 3x oversubscribed. We could have done a much bigger fund, but we said that doesn't fit with our strategy, right? There's a reason why we're $40 million and why we invest where we are. There was one very impactful book for me as a person that I think I look for these concepts in everything that I do. Don't know if you read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig.
No, I have not. I have heard about it
Okay.
actually, because it has a weird name compared to. You think it's just a small handbook type thing, or it does not sound as it's something a big philosophical work, but it actually is.
Exactly. Yeah, it's an amazing journey of a book, I would say, and I highly recommend it to anyone, whether or not you're interested in motorcycles or Zen or philosophy. I think it's very well written. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig, Pirsig.
We'll put a link to it on u.bc as well.
Perfect. So there's this concept of quality. It's literally about motorcycle maintenance. Like, how do I repair my motorcycle appropriately? Because it breaks down and he has to do that in the story. And then goes often in this very long tirade about quality and what that means. So he defines it in like two different types of qualities: dynamic and static. So dynamic quality is kind of instantly recognizable beauty, excellence, this like, oh, this has value immediately, like it's obvious to everyone who sees it. And then there's a different type of quality, which is called static, which is sort of a deeper pattern, something that isn't visible at the first view, but if you go a few steps deeper and try to understand it, then you realize that there is quality here, like with a big Q. And specifically, this can be social or cultural, like we form laws or we form cultural patterns or groups, but also organic, inorganic, so biological cells organizing themselves, or I would say even how we build semiconductors has this quality. It's this beautiful pattern of excellence, really. How can we as humanity go from living in caves to literally taking sand or a compound of sand and make these nanoscale structures and then use it for something, right? And there's also the intellectual quality, which now going back to us as a fund, what we look for is this type of quality in each founder, in each idea that we evaluate. If we don't see that, then it's very clear, but it does take preparation to see it. Specifically, the static type of quality. We can't assume to always find the dynamic quality. Those are kind of the obvious ones. They're getting picked up by other funds. We can do the other thing. We can go a few levels deeper by preparing properly and having the context. And that's why I think sovereign compute, now again, going back to your question, this is where we as a fund have a reason to win, or experience at least, quote unquote, win the hearts of our founders. We have the same frame of reference as they do, if they fit our fund, right? There are founders that we just don't fit with, right? And that's totally fine. There are other options for them usually. But there are certain founders that when we explain our thesis to them, which is always part of our kind of first intro call, we try to tell them who we are and so on. They say, wow, yeah, I never heard it explained like this before, but it makes total sense. I think we're very aligned. This may sound like a very soft criteria, but a lot of what we do is building rapport in the early stages, trying to understand how founders reason, how they think, and ultimately how they evaluate ideas. If they think our ideas are great, then okay, they like us, perfect. Now we try to evaluate their ideas, and for that we need to do deep research ahead of time. We need to be prepared when coming into a call so that we understand what is this like intellectual quality, what is this deeper pattern that they're going after.
And then let's go back to the three underpinnings of the thesis, so to say, the three parts: the scale of compute, the resilience of compute, and the flow of compute. If we just try and unpack each of those and say, if we start with scale, what are the technologies and solutions that fit within that part of the thesis?
So the reason we're not saying we're a semiconductor fund, we're not a quantum computing fund or anything like that, is because the technologies are somewhat temporal, right? They're accurate now, so I can name some technologies that are fitting today that we're looking at, but there's constant evolution here. So we can't tie ourselves down to one specific technology. Compute is a very wide concept, right? That in some cases we can apply to very specific types of technologies, say semiconductors, or photonics or quantum computing. But to name a very out there example, I'm talking to a founder that is growing brains in a vat and using them for compute. Like he can literally program brain tissue, and use it for compute, right? The brain is sort of the most advanced compute device that we have access to. We just need to use it right.
Okay, and then you'd answer the same when I ask you with resilience.
Maybe framing it slightly differently, what are kind of interesting developments or inflection points that we're seeing right now in these three areas? So for scale, we still today have access to high-end fabs, so in Taiwan or Korea or the US. But as Europe, we're still pretty far behind on developing our own. We actually have the knowledge. I think we could build it, but it would require massive investment. What can we do instead is we can keep build the IP for inventing new types of compute. One, of course, being this brain example that I just gave. Another one would be new types of photonics. There are some companies that we looked at that do different parts of the kind of compute value chain. If you think about a normal compute architecture, then they do certain parts of it using photonics that speeds up this 1000x. And just having this critical component helps us scale compute. That's the whole idea. Others are things like we can now program DNA really cheaply because we have ways of cutting up and replacing parts of the DNA or RNA strings.
CRISPR technology, am I right when I say that?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to be too jargony. Yeah.
I'm so happy every time I get a bit of a technology right. Okay, cool, nice. And then flow, an example there?
Yeah, so flow is take an example directly from the battlefield in Ukraine, because that's somewhere where I don't spend literal time there, but I spend a lot of time talking to people who are in there. They have Starlink, and that is a major differentiator towards Russia today. If they don't have comms, they are not well off, right? That's the single most important technology maybe that helps them survive today. People say it's drones, like yes, but today still like 99% of all drones need communications, right? So communication-less drone is today pretty worthless. There's AI and like fancy autonomy solutions, but I would say in 99% of cases of what's actually working in the battlefield, it's communications driven drones. So I can control it, I can get information back. There are a lot of ways that Russia tries to disrupt communications through electronic warfare specifically, and there are ways to circumvent that. As someone called it, this is the most faster horses solution that he ever heard, but people actually use like fiber optic drones. I don't know if you saw that. Like they have a coil of fiber optic cable attached to the drone, and then a fixed station somewhere close to the command point or the point where they launch the drone, and goes out and they get really high quality video back, and it's unjammable. You can't take it down with regular electronic warfare. Like this is happening today in Ukraine, but I don't want to wait for it to arrive like to the next nuclear plant next to me or like to my local power station or whatever, right? Before we have a solution to tackle those problems.
Yeah. Then tell me one final part, because we spoke a lot about compute and the technology, so to say. And here in the end, you also ended up talking about the Ukraine war. But there's also this sovereign part of your thesis, which is obviously a clear doubling down on a very important geopolitical inflection that's happening. Tell me a bit about that read, both from a founding or from a GP team, from a partner team, you and Alexander, wanting to do something meaningful. I imagine that's part of it. Then I imagine there's also something around seeing that, okay, there's also a big market opportunity purely here. But I'd love to hear the thinking behind doubling down on the inflection of sovereignty.
Originally, I started in 2022 here at Inflection, and about 2 months after I joined, almost on the day now, 3 years ago, Russia invaded Ukraine, right? And in the coming days after that, I realized, wow, the world is not as stable as I thought. my kind of pacifist leanings are unrealistic. Like, of course, I don't want to hurt people. No one wants to hurt people. Most people don't want to hurt people. Now, the reality is we need to have the ability to hurt other people. That's literally what people think defense tech means. I will only defend myself and I won't hurt the other person. If you ask a Ukrainian, that's not what they will say. They will say, we need to fight back as hard as possible because there's no other solution. They will do horrible things to our country. My personal journey in this has been somewhat separate from the VC inflection side of it. So from a personal perspective, I co-founded the European Defense Tech Hub about a year ago together with Benjamin Walba, also a former VC at Lunar Ventures, because we saw in the US, there's this massive optimism and kind of positivity around defense tech and building important technology. So we said, let's just take what they're doing, how they're doing it, and try to reapply it to European context and European founders. Why are people building like AI wrapper companies today when there's a war in Europe? That just doesn't make sense. They're like, are people just not aware, or are they just ignoring it? Like, it seemed completely senseless to us. So we've done a couple of hackathons now with about 1,000 hackers in total. I think around 20 or 30 companies have come out of it. Really, really talented people from all across Europe that want to build important things for European sovereignty. Of course, for the US, this has been a topic much longer. European defense or US defense tech exists as a category since much, much longer, since Palantir, essentially. Of course, before that, there were other primes, but Palantir has been kind of the golden child of that story, and Andrew, of course. I think European markets will not look kindly upon someone trying to copy that. If someone tells me again they want to become the European Andrew or the European Palantir, I will question heavily how they intend to do that, because I think there are a few lessons you can take from those stories, but you cannot take the template, the cookie cutter, and just put it onto Europe, because that will fail miserably. Because it's a massively fragmented market. There's a lot of history, and just look at Germany, France. Collaboration has not always been great. And then there's very separate, fragmented pools of capital, pools of talent that we need to somehow unite. So from that perspective, I think our best bet is to build really deep technologies and try to apply them to defense and government as soon as possible. Give the people that are at the front, either literally at the front or about to be on the front, the best tools for their job. There's no other way, right? We don't have the numbers, we don't have the money. We need to be more innovative than the other side. That's the only solution. Yeah, especially now, given the latest development from the US, right, with increasingly leaning away from Europe as an ally, and specifically calling Zelensky a dictator, right, which is absolutely insane and ridiculous.
Yeah, I have to say, so at the time of recording, that's 1 day ago, actually. And I have to say, the last 24 hours, I've been walking around with a bit of a nagging feeling, because many will have heard me on the podcast lean a bit into the MAGA movement and understanding where they come from, the whole takeover by the tech scene, top US tech scene of the White House, like seeing a lot of things there that when I after a 3-year process of trying to get into their mindset, really could see a lot of, understanding of why are they doing as they're doing. And also wishing that some of that movement would come to Europe. I'm saying some of it, I hope everyone will know which parts less so. But then seeing the latest move where we're being as decoupled as we are, it really hurts me and really makes me, fuck. And I think once again, here's just a thing that comes out of the Trump administration, calling Zelensky a dictator, aligning so closely with Russia, that I just am not able to understand. We spoke about it just before we started, and you said, I hope I can restate that here. You said, well, I actually think it's probably about them recognizing China as the main real threat to the US. And they looked around the globe and said, who's our strongest potential ally, and the name that comes up is Russia. And if they then need to throw Ukraine under the bus to be able to get that, well, they're actually willing to do it, because you can then think about the motivations other than just being country and the US motivations. Some of them might also be tied to the individuals involved. But I think that sounds like a very plausible thought, but it definitely makes me think that the importance of European sovereignty and as your thesis being a part of its sovereign compute is all the more important.
It's not only, it's a short-sighted and I think unrealistic, but it's also very disrespectful of human life in general, right? I care about sovereignty. I care about Europe because I happen to live here, but that doesn't mean that I value European lives more than Russian lives or anyone else's, right? It just means that in the US, like Trump-Russia discussion, it means that Trump completely doesn't care about what happens to the citizens of Europe and is willing to trade someone else's misfortune and potentially lives for his own empowerment. But that's not the person we want to have in power of one of the most powerful countries in the world. I mean, I'm not saying that the other powerful countries aren't like that. But...
No, I've always said that either it's a person that has these tendencies or it's a system that has other tendencies that are potentially as bad. That's how I saw the US election, at least. I have one final question, and we don't have much time for it, but I do want to ask you, moving from crypto to now sovereign compute, how has that affected your LP base? How has those conversations happened with them? I'm super curious to hear.
Yeah, good question. So we've had different reactions. Some people that I would say placed us in a secure bucket of crypto funds before and now need to reassign us to another bucket. And we're like, no, we're not a bucket fund. And they still try to do it. And then we're, okay, fine, we'll explain it to you. And then others that are saying, actually, we've observed the same things that you have in the crypto ecosystem, and we will go with you. We agree on your fundamental premise of this being kind of an expansion of the thesis and seeing crypto as part of it still as an important technology, but not as the only invest into things that have blockchain in them, right? Or that are somehow connected to the crypto ecosystem. I think also from if I'm putting my money with an LP, I would like them not to have a clear categorization. I would like them to understand deeply what their funds are investing into instead.
All right, so we're now up on time, and I got to wrap this up, but we could talk for ages and ages. I really hope we'll be doing much more with both you and Benjamin with your defense tech group, because I think it's incredibly important work, and I'm really trying to carry the flag around this. So thank you so much, Jonatan, for the work you're doing and the work you and Benjamin are doing as well, not just in Inflection, but also that you've partnered with Benjamin to do in a hackathon type format. I think that's incredibly inspiring.
Yeah, thank you for asking relevant questions. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Here's a few words from our beloved sponsor. If you're looking to meet key players in Central Eastern Europe's private markets, this is the conference you don't want to miss. Join us for the 14th edition of the premier networking event for emerging Europe. You'll meet investors from firms like Antenna Digital Ventures, EBRD, EIB, Erst Group, IFC, Tibus Ventures, and many more. Join 0100 Emerging Europe from May the 15th to the 16th in Budapest.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.